Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this last bonus episode of the Duke Football Coverage Podcast, brought to you, as always, by Bull City Coordinators. We are going to close out season one with a bang. We have Matthew of Hokie Smash on Twitter and All Sports Discussion, the Talking ACC Sports, the longest running independent ACC podcast in existence. Matthew was kind enough to have me on to start the year, and I'm bringing him on to close the year. How are you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing great. Got one more game to go. I got the Who's this week. Who's your daddy? The Commonwealth Cup.
I cannot stand UVA, so I'm rooting for you guys to bring home a win.
Good. Very good to hear.
Why don't we do this? Because part of what we're going to talk about this evening is what's in store for ACC teams at the end of the season, and particularly those who are likely to make coaching changes. Now, I'm going to read off the list of the schools, and then you tell me who you think is likely to make a change and why, and we can go through some of them one by one. But we've got Wake Forest, which I think we would agree is safe as far as making a change by the school. Clemson, I think safe. NC State, safe. Louisville, what are your thoughts on that one real quick? And then we can come back to it in more detail. Change or no change?
I don't think there will be a change, but I would suspect that Scott Satterfield's seat is pretty warm right now, but he'd be well advised not to get smoked by Kentucky.
Okay. Florida State.
I think the Florida State coach, I think Norvell probably bought himself some time with the win over Miami. That's my personal opinion there. It is weird for me to see that Florida State and Florida, the final game of the season there is for bowl eligibility. I think that's a little weird, but but here we are. It's 2021.
Yeah, tell me
right?
about it. I mean, those teams were great when I was growing up, so it is. But
indeed.
Boston College, I think safe.
Yes.
What about the Cuse, Syracuse?
I think that, correct me if I'm wrong. Are they 6 wins? Ben? I can't remember.
I believe they are.
If they are, then Dino should be safe. I think Dino should be safe. Dino should be safe. In fact, if he were to win his next game, he might actually get a couple of votes for ACC Coach of the Year because they were horrendous last year. So he if he ends up with 7 wins, he's going to be sitting pretty good. I think he's bought him. The short of it is, Ben, I think he's bought himself some time.
Right, they are currently 5 and 6.
Okay. Thank you. Who do they play?
They close with Pitt, so I think they may end 5 and 7.
Okay, so I still think he'll be okay. His seat might be a little warm, but I think he'll be back next year.
Okay, now going from there, we've got Pittsburgh. I think that's safe.
Yes.
All right. Miami, I think that one is hot.
I would say so too. They fired their AD. That's never a good sign for Manny Diaz. He may buy himself some time here, but the loss to Florida State isn't going to sit well with some alumni. It looks to me like they found their quarterback of the future in Van Dyke, but they're going to be. I think that you're probably right about that. You change that AD, the AD is probably going to want to make his or her move on the next football coach. And I will say this: I do not think the Oregon coach Mario Cristobal will go to Miami. I would be very surprised if that happened, Ben, simply because Oregon has 7 seniors this year. I think they have a legit chance. I mean, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong or not, but I think they have a legit chance to be in the college football playoff next year. I don't think Mario Cristobal will want to leave that. I think that if you're at Oregon, you have money raining from so many trees. It's kind of unbelievable. You have more facilities than you could ever imagine in your life. And right now, USC or UCLA don't have their act together in terms of keeping the best players in the state of California or the LA area in general. And I would be very surprised to see Mario Cristobal go to Miami. I mean, if he goes to Miami, it's because he loves Miami and he wants to build that place back up. But I highly doubt at this point, because that's who their top target would be.
Right. And we're going to come back to the Miami one in a little more detail and some of the problems associated with it. Certainly since I've entered adulthood and onward, it has not been the program that we all remember from when I was younger. But the next two jobs, I think you would agree, are safe. UVA,
yes,
UNC. I don't see either programs changing head coach, although UNC is probably going to shake up the coordinator some.
I'm with you on both counts. Although I think some of the shine is wearing off on the North Carolina head coach Mac Brown. You know, he's a good recruiter. You can get him in the door, but it's starting to feel, you know, the last this year in particular, I think, was starting to give you vibes of how he coached at Texas in the last couple of years.
And one thing that was interesting is I did a joke game preview at bullcitycoordinators.com for the Duke Carolina game. I didn't realize this, but he has never won the ACC. Not when he was at North Carolina the first time, and he hasn't, of course, done it since. And everybody thought this was going to be a good year for him to do that. And really, if you look at the Coastal, it's been a pretty mediocre division this year. So I think that you're right. The pressure might start getting on Mac Brown here pretty soon.
Right. And I think that he was only a short-term solution anyway, you know, because he's not gonna be there long term. So, you know, it's anybody's, you know, this division. I mean, if you get a good coach in here, you could win this division pretty quickly with really most of the teams, because pretty much most of the teams are committing resources to get there. I mean, you've seen this. You've had several different teams win the Coastal Division title over the last 5 or 6 years. You know, so.
And to your point, let's look at the Coastal and go over the conference records. Pitt's running away with it at 6-1, but Miami and Virginia are both 4-3. North Carolina and Virginia Tech are 3-4. Georgia Tech is 2-6, and my Blue Devils are winless with 7 losses. So you're right. It's not like a real dominant division. It's one that you could easily win without that much trouble.
Right. And it's true. I mean, you mentioned your Blue Devils, you know, are 0-7, but Duke is one of those teams who has won the Coastal, right? So it can be done if you have the right person and resources there. You know what I mean? I mean, it hasn't. Everybody thought that Miami was going to just absolutely dominate the Coastal when they came in. That's never been the case, right? You know, and so unless they get the right person in there, I don't foresee that guess to come through, right? I mean, Virginia Tech's probably done as good as any team in this conference in winning the Coastal. So I mean, it's a division that's ripe for the picking, and if you get the right coach and you get the right players in there, and you know you have a commitment to resources, you can get a few things done in the Coastal Division. I mean, I think everybody is still chasing Clemson for now.
I think that's fair. Now I'm going to skip one who's already committed to making a change, your Hokies, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. And you can tell us what you think about where the Hokies are going to go and where they are.
Sure.
But Georgia Tech, I have a hard time when I was looking at the win-loss record today for Collins. I don't really see how you make a case of bringing him back. He's only getting 3 wins a year. And if you go back and look at what historically Georgia Tech has done, that is nowhere near what they expect and what prior coaches did when they were let go. Chan Gailey, granted, he wasn't lighting it up, but he wasn't in the averaging 3 wins a year ballpark. I'm pulling his stats up now. He was 7-6, 7-6, 7-5, 7-5, 9-5, 7-5. And then you look at Paul Johnson's last couple of years there after they won to your point, they won the Coastal. They went 3-9. This was in 2014 when they last won the Coastal. 3-9, 9-4, 5-6, 7-6. And Jeff Collins is nowhere in that ballpark. What are your thoughts on what Georgia Tech does?
I mean, I think he'll come back only because Georgia Tech's probably in the same position as a lot of ACC schools, Ben. They don't necessarily have the resources to go out there and, fire this coach and then bring in another one, particularly when I think they're still, I can't remember, they still might be paying a basketball coach. And so, so there's that, but, I suspect that, it's going to take, it takes a while. I got to be fair here. It takes a while to transition to one offense when you're on the triple option and go to another one, but he keeps making the same mistakes, game management mistakes, game after game after game. I mean, Jeff and I were kind of joking. I think you hit in with us on Twitter here. At various times and who we thought the worst ACC football team was, whether it was Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, or Duke. And I think Justin Fuente finally met his match when they went down there when they were playing at Georgia. And I remember specifically when Collins called a shotgun play at fourth and 3, and they're down by like maybe 6 points. And there was like 12 minutes to go in the game. They didn't have to chase points, right? They didn't have to go to the touchdown. All they had to do was get the field goal, because every time, when Virginia Tech notably gets down by 3 points or so they start getting really, at least this prior regime here started getting really conservative on offense. And the joke was that, well, Justin Fuente finally met his match on somebody who was a worse offensive play caller. And so, but I think he will be back next year, probably for the same reason that Justin Fuente came back this year, right? That they probably don't have a lot of resources. They need to wait. They need to wait it out. That doesn't mean that Georgia Tech shouldn't be making changes at some of the key position coaches on the field, rather than staying loyal to certain offensive staff, right? But last year, most people thought that Virginia Tech was going to make a coaching change last year when it was the first losing season in 30 years. But then COVID came along, and you saw people on the staff. They saw people taking pay decreases in the athletic department. They saw people getting, that were taking voluntary retirements. They saw people that were losing their jobs. So they didn't, under COVID, I think they probably thought it would be like a bad sort of publicity type of thing to get rid of Justin Fuente last year. And that's why they waited until this year. And it's the same thing with Georgia Tech. I think they're waiting, from a resource standpoint, they'll probably wait another year.
That's fair, but he's going to be under some pressure, I think, to overhaul.
Sure. If
you're averaging 3 wins a year and you're 7-18 in conference, there's no way the boosters and the school is going to be agreeable and satisfied with that.
I agree with you. He'll be on the hot seat next year. He'll be, he'll probably have one of the hottest seats in the ACC next year.
And I think that kind of ties into the point I wanted to make about Satterfield at Louisville. That's not a bad job, but if you look at some of the other jobs that have already come open, it may be hard for Louisville to get the coach that it would want. And if you say, well, Satterfield, it looks like they could get the 7 wins, maybe 8 with the bowl game. That's not a bad season. Let's see what happens. I think maybe this year may not be the right year for Louisville to make a change.
I agree with you. He'll be back. He'll be back. If he has 7 or 8 wins, he'll be back. And that would be a notable increase from last year.
Okay, let's talk about the last 2 schools.
Yes.
Tech I'm going to let you go first because you're the guest. So, Virginia Tech, tell us what you're thinking about Virginia Tech, what the fan bases are thinking about Virginia Tech, and where do you ultimately think Virginia Tech's going to end up with its new head coach?
Okay, so kind of like what I was saying earlier. Most people think that this might be a year too late because you mentioned it yourself here earlier. There were going to be a lot of really good jobs open, this year. You see Washington and USC on the West Coast. I mean, I think we just saw today. I believe Franklin re-signed with Penn State. Is that correct? I think I saw something about that on Twitter.
I'll check. I know they've been talking about it, but the other thing too, the UT San Antonio coach signed a 10-year extension.
Sure.
The coaches a lot of times get that extension for job security and they find someone willing to pay the buyout. So
for sure. I mean, and you've got the Florida job that's open, you've got the LSU job that's open. There's all kinds of jobs that are open right now. And
they did 2 hours ago, James Franklin signed a 10-year contract.
Right. I was going to say, I mean, there's probably some good things and bad things on that. The good things are that, we're not, we wouldn't be competing with necessarily Penn State for an open job. The bad thing is that James Franklin's been spending a lot of time in the Hampton Roads area recruiting kids, right? In Virginia Tech's backyard, so I was kind of hoping that he'd go to the West Coast. But so to answer your question, I mean, I think, Virginia Tech fans wanted to change last year. That didn't happen, like I said, for obvious reasons. Like the pandemic probably limited the action on, moving a lot of coaches out. It didn't with Auburn, right? Auburn got rid of that coach pretty quickly last year. But so we go to this year, and then you see a lot of fans making kind of pacifying jokes on Twitter, like Virginia Tech coach Mike Tomlin, putting jokes out there to pacify themselves, knowing things like that will never happen, and then getting to the point of realistic hires, right? And one of them that I see out there was, that people are mentioning is Billy Napier from Louisiana Lafayette. He's certainly a name that I see out there for Virginia Tech. I think a lot of Virginia Tech fans would be really happy to have him. As of late, I should say, Ben, I've heard his name mentioned in conjunction with the University of Florida job. So I'm not sure that Virginia Tech will be able to compete against an SEC team. I think he actually wants to be an SEC country. But, in my mind, I also think that schools like LSU in Florida are really want to make a splash with their hires, and so they, they may not necessarily, like LSU may not necessarily want to hire somebody from in-state, for that job. So, but anyway, that's one of the names I've heard. I've heard Bill O'Brien's name mentioned in passing. I've actually heard Dan Mullen's name in passing. I don't know how realistic those two are. And then the name I'm hearing more and more often is Charles Huff from the University of Marshall. And so those are just a few of the targets that I see out there. I probably have, there are some assistants out there, perhaps at a different level. Like I've heard Tony Elliott, but I don't. But I think that the top. If I had to rate them right now, if I had to give you on the picture on who I think Virginia Tech will hire, I think Charles Huff is right there, man. I think he's probably. I would lay him as the on-site favorite, and then I'd probably put Billy Napier at the second. Those are the two I'm thinking. And they want somebody who has a proven program, really the ability to develop a program from the ground up, keep these recruiting relations together within state, because that's one of the things that Virginia Tech has to do, and it has to do is to kind of remake its recruiting relationships with the rest of the state of Virginia. Because when Virginia Tech, I know you remember this, Ben, when Virginia Tech was good, it owned the 757, the Hampton Roads area for recruiting, and the 804, the Richmond area. It got the best players out of Virginia. And if you can get the best players, at least a lot of the good players out of Virginia, you got a pretty darn good football team in the ACC.
All right. Well, you're not the only Tech guy who's mentioned Dan Mullen. That'll be interesting to see if that happens. And I think hiring somebody from Marshall would also be interesting for fan support. I'd like to see how that occurs. Before we get to Duke, which I do want to talk about with you, any chance you think Clawson leaves Wake Forest?
It's interesting you say that. I was going to mention him in our top 5, but they're making a substantial investment down there in their facilities. So to me, it looks like they're trying to keep him. Like there's like a $20 million commitment for their facilities. He'll be able to get what he wants in terms of his salary. It seems to me that he could be the coach for life if he wanted to be there. I wouldn't be opposed to him coming to Virginia Tech. I just don't know whether he will really want to leave there,
Right. His stock is never going to be higher, though, than it is right now. And that's always the thing that you have to wonder about as a head coach. But he's a really good fit at Wake.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you look at his history, let's think about where he's been at. He's been at Florida, right? He's been at the University of Richmond. He's been at Bowling Green State University. These are all 3 tough places to win, right? In general, these are, except for Bowling Green State, those other 2 are hardcore academic schools. And the Wake is the same way, right? I mean, it's a tough academic school, and you've got to be able to, have time to build and develop your players and that sort of thing. I would I would be supportive of having him come to Virginia Tech. I'm not so sure that he'll leave there. I think he can be like Groby. I think he can be like Groby, and I think he can be like like your coach that's been there forever, like Cutcliffe. I think he can probably be there for a long time if he wants to.
All right, I'm here. You got me?
I got you.
All right, let me. Sorry about that. Here's what I was saying about Cut. It's really, really unfortunate that this is occurring because we have seen a lot of, over the years, Duke not being relevant. And for a good long while, Duke was relevant. And it's very, very unfortunate that we are seeing Duke football go back to how it was when Ted Roof and Carl Franks were the head coach. And that's no knock on those guys. It's just sad to see.
I'm with you.
What are your thoughts on the Duke program? I don't see how Cut can come back. I just don't see any avenue for it. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. Would you like some suggestions on who I think Duke should hire?
Yes, I would. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you might swing for the fences. Here's a question I have for you. Are you a Panthers fan?
I am. Actually, he's on my list. Go ahead.
Matt Rule. Is he? I mean, if they don't like it, I'm not sure how long he'll last in Carolina. And it seems to me that you have 3 good candidates right in your state. You've got Matt Rule. I would, if I'm the Duke AD, I ask him, right? Because I think they can probably find some way to fund him. And I think, he knows how to coach at a private school already. He coached at Baylor, right? And he had to step in a difficult situation there, right? I mean, after the Title IX issues, he had to step in a difficult situation there and clean that up. So that's the first thing. So he's no stranger to hard work like that. The second one, I actually would consider Mike Houston from East Carolina. I think that he's done a good job, and he's on an outside list for me too, Ben, at Virginia Tech. I mean, because he was at, if you recall, he was at JMU before he went over to East Carolina, and he knows this region well. And he's somebody that Duke should consider as well. I think that there's a young and up and comer at the University of Charlotte Will Healy that has done well. I think that he's probably a little further down your list if you're looking for to get the power, to hire a younger coach. Those are three that came off the top of my head, and they're all in your home. They're all in North Carolina. So what are your thoughts? What are some people that you have in mind?
You have people down that I think we ought to reach out to, that Duke ought to reach out to, that Nina King ought to reach out to. The question is, does Duke want to go with somebody who has been at the school before? We don't know the answer to that. Matt Lubick is available, for example. Do you want to get a guy like Mike Bobo, Jake Bobo's father? Okay. Do you want to try to get somebody who's been at an academic school like Fitzgerald from Northwestern? Do you think maybe he's been at Northwestern long enough? Or do you try to replicate the Cutcliffe model? Do you go after somebody that you think, hey, he was at a school, maybe got let go too soon, and he wants to go somewhere with some job security, maybe a guy who's got something to prove? Do you go crazy and try to get someone like Gary Patterson or Tom Herman? I mean, I don't know. What about Texas Tech's former head coach, Matt Wells? I mean, we're just throwing names out there to see what's possible. I don't know, but the guys that you mentioned, those three guys are all on my watch list of what could occur. I don't know, though, if Matt Rule is going to be affordable.
I think that's probably true. I mean, but he may be, he may be. I mean, it depends on what he was paid at Baylor, right? And what he's willing to accept. Maybe some of those folks take that on for the challenge. You could have a ton of money coming back from Carolina, with an out in that contract. But, I do think Mike Houston should be on that list. He's done well with East Carolina in short order. And by the way, I think you should watch that game on Saturday, because I think they're going to give Cincy everything they can handle on Saturday.
What time are they playing? Because I'm going down to the Duke-Miami game.
I'm not sure.
I think it may be Cutcliffe's last game. And in my entire lifetime, with the exception of a few years under Spurrier, which were glorious, but I was really too young to remember that well, Cut's the only guy who's made that program relevant. And that's a hard job, and he really did it.
He sure did. I mean, the one thing I would say about Houston is that he will get people into good physical shape. You will have a fast offense. It will be all about speed. You will be flying around on D. I mean, I remember watching them. I mean, he had a heck of accomplishment when he was at JMU, going up and winning at North Dakota State University in the playoffs. And like I said, he's remade ECU pretty quickly. They're probably going to be in the favorites in that conference next year, if not close.
And they've gotten better as the season's gone on, which is what you want to see from a team. And
absolutely,
that is unfortunately the opposite of what we're seeing right now. And I'm not knocking any of the players. I love all those guys, and I appreciate everything that they do. And I know they go out there and they do their best, but this team has not gotten better as the season's gone on. And I think it goes back to coaching. And I don't know how you're going to sell the fan base and the program, and probably a lot of the players, on giving a coach another year who's 5-7 in 2019, 2-9 last year, and is looking like he's headed to a 3-9 season and an 0 in conference.
I'm with you. I agree.
All right. Well, what else do you want to promote for us?
Well, sure. Tomorrow night, Virginia Tech rekindles an old Metro Conference rivalry. I know you remember. You may remember the Metro Conference, Ben.
I know the Metro Conference, believe me.
Tomorrow night, Virginia Tech plays Memphis at 9:30 on ESPN on ESPN, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I wrote about it at allsportsdiscussion.com. It's it's going to be a contrast in offensive styles, because Memphis really likes to get up and down the court. When Virginia Tech has one of the most deliberate offensive styles in the country. Virginia Tech has has, what do they have, like 4 players that are 23, 24 years old. I mean, these guys are grown men, right? And then you're playing against a really young team in Memphis, and I'll be excited to see that game tomorrow night. I mean, it was a pretty competitive series while Virginia Tech and Memphis were in the same conference, and that game is on tomorrow night. We'll promote that for sure. I always want to promote allsportsdiscussion.com and our Twitter account at allsportsdacc. We write about the ACC all the time. And like I said, we have a variety of guests on our podcast as well. You've been on there several times. We try to preview all of the ACC football teams in the summer, and even last year, we got every one of them in during the pandemic. So we were very happy that we could get that done. And we really concentrate on anything that's ACC, but we do write about anything that's anything about the world of sports on that site. You'll see there, and it's a good outlet for both Jeff and I. Jeff is the owner of the site. That's Jeffrey Fan. You can follow him on Twitter at Talkin' ACC Sports. You can follow me on Twitter at @HoagieSmash_ASD. That's ASD, of course, for All Sports Discussion. And so that's kind of fun, but it's fun for us because we're like you. Like we're independent. We have an independent outlet, so nobody can control our editorial content. And I know that's a plus for you as well, Ben, because I've seen some of your hard-hitting articles. They've been good too. Your hard-hitting articles on Duke football, and I guess I have a question for you.
Okay.
How are you feeling now? I mean, you're running into this. This is the last year with Coach K. How are you feeling about that?
Well, so I have accepted with the basketball program, and it was funny. Everybody was freaking out about the way the Citadel was shooting last night. I actually, when I was at law school at W&L, did public address for VMI men's basketball a couple of times. And the Citadel coach was the coach there. And so when I hope he's okay, by the way, after what happened to him last night during the game. But when when those guys started launching all those threes and folks were freaking out about it, I said, hey, go back and watch those old VMI teams with Williams, who made it to the NBA. That's just how he plays. But that's me trying not to get in the point that I'm about to make, because I'm probably going to get crucified here. But once the one and done era started happening, I had kind of resigned myself to the fact, I think it was a couple of years ago, I just realized when you go that young, you're going to run into older team buzzsaws like you just mentioned with Virginia Tech. And you're only going to be able to go so far, regardless of how talented you are. So I have not let myself get so worked up by the basketball. And instead, if they win, I'm excited. But if they lose, I don't get down about it. I just say, hey, you know what? It's a younger team. This happens. I'm not going to really get upset about this. Okay. And so what I've done instead is invest myself more and more into the football team, which is maybe hard emotionally right now for me, given the way that they're going. But to your point about Coach K, you can't replace a guy like that. And he's been the coach as long as I've been alive. I mean,
sure.
He's been the only guy on the sideline as long as I've been alive. That's going to be a big change, and he's going to be missed, but the program will continue. It will go on, and he has left it. You talk about leaving places better than you find them. He has certainly done that, and I think the program's in very good hands. I think you got a bunch of good young coaches there who want to maintain it and grow it and maybe do some stuff a little bit differently. I'm going to miss Coach K. I'm going to miss him a lot. I was fortunate enough before the pandemic hit to go see a game in Cameron, and it was great. And it's going to be the end of an era, and it's going to be sad, but Coach K's got a military background, and you know what? The Army lives on. The Marine Corps lives on. It's still there after you leave, right? And he has done, I think, what he set out to do and plenty, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. I'm going to miss it. I'm not going to lie about it. I'm going to miss it, but I'm not going to let myself live in the past. I'm going to look ahead to the future and enjoy the future.
Outstanding. I'll say a word about Virginia Tech men's basketball coach. I think the Hokies, you live down in the Southwest Virginia. You know that Virginia Tech probably got really lucky hiring a coach who has his dream home on Smith Mountain Lake, right? So it doesn't happen too often that you get a fit like that. When you roll the dice and you get a fit like that. But that's what Virginia Tech got, and that's the kind of coach that they need, similar to when they had Frank Beamer as a football coach. And that's the kind of aura that you get from Mike Young.
Well, I think it's going to be a good basketball season. It'll be a lot of fun, but it's going to be an exciting football off season that I'm sure we're all going to be about. And I'm rooting for you guys on Saturday.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I'll say this very quickly before we go. I was surprised that Whit Babcock decided to make the move before the end of the season on Fuente. I really thought they'd wait till the end of the season. And I think that surprised a lot of people, rather than 2 weeks before. And he did it. And so, that's probably more of a situation of like he has somebody in mind and we're all trying to figure out who it is. So
that, and to your point, with early signing and the other jobs that are open and the problems with recruiting that Virginia Tech's had, you need to get out in front of it.
Exactly.
And I think that had a lot to do with it. But Matthew, I just want to say thank you for coming on, and for all you people who have listened and who have read our blog at bullcitycoordinators.com, in which we have raised some, hard-hitting issues. I was curious, that question that Coach Cutt had at the press conference recently about his energy level, where that came from and where that started to get play from, because we've talked about that a lot. But it did seem to get under his collar. I appreciate all you guys listening to the podcast, going to the site, and reading what we're putting out there. We have a lot of fun doing it. It's very enjoyable. And we are going to have some guests starting in season 2. I'm going to go ahead and tell you the first guest, Matthew, you may remember him, is none other than Randy Cuthbert, the former great Duke running back who arguably has had no equal at the school. No shade to Mateo Durant. You're in the conversation, but Randy Cuthbert was something else. Let me tell you, he is going to be our first guest. We are working on a couple of current players, and because of NIL rules, I'm going to hope that some of you loyal listeners will start donating. I activated the listener support so that we can get more of the players to come on. Any donations would be appreciated. I'll find a way to give you guys a shout out on the podcast if you do. If you don't worry about it. I just do this because I'm having fun and I'm enjoying it. But follow us on Twitter at Duke FB Coverage. Go to our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor. We are anywhere you listen to podcasts. We've got a lot of great guests lined up for season 2. And we cannot wait to get started. And to all you Duke football fans, players, coaches, and family members, we appreciate everything that you do. It's been a rough season, but we still support you guys. Go Duke.